Language Review, review de língua, português, tá? O cara vai fazer review da língua portuguesa.
Bom dia e bem-vindo ao meu canal. Tudo jóia? Hoje vamos falar de português, otherwise formerly known as Portuguese, Spicy Spanish, Brazilian, or Mozambican. This is the 5th episode of Language Review, a series where I go through the languages of the world and review them, sort of like a film critic or a video game reviewer, but for languages, specifically from the perspective of a language learner. I'll discuss who speaks them, their grammar, their difficulty, and tons of other stuff before finally giving them an official Language Simp certified rating on the Simp scale. If you enjoy this video, let me know in the comments which language you'd like me to review next, and without further ado, vamos lá.
Why would I learn Portuguese when I could just learn Spanish? They're like the same language.
Não é verdade, para com isso. This might start World War III and IV in the comments, but in the same way that Ronaldo
Não é verdade, para com isso.
than Messi, Portuguese is better than Spanish.
Porra!
Infelizmente eu devo concordar com ela.
You should study Portuguese because it's really spicy, and learning it will unlock tons.
Hot take aí, tá? Hot
Como
take do gringo, tá?
Como assim, spicy?
Spicy é tipo temperado, apimentado.
Safado.
Não, não, que isso? Really spicy. Não, é tipo
Eu pensei isso.
apimentado.
Of DLC, as there are 260 million NPCs who speak it on 5 continents. But when you think of who speaks Portuguese, there is really one giant and beautiful country with the coolest flag in the world that immediately comes to mind. And I think you all know which country I'm talking about. Mozambique. Portuguese is pretty common in Africa, and not just in Mozambique. It's also spoken in Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, and on a few teeny-weeny little islands that I couldn't name to save my life.
Mano, tô ligado que na China fala português. Tem um lugar da China que fala português.
But did you know that Portuguese
Olha lá, ó, ele falando agora.
is also an official language of communist China? I'm not even trolling. It's spoken in the Chinese Special Administrative Region of Macau, or as I like to call it, Communist Casino
pra lá,
Island.
vamos pra lá.
Sadly,
Bora,
port
bora.
speakers there are rapidly dying
Ilha do
off, and there will
comunismo.
soon be more
Cristo.
casinos there
Tô ficando
than
doido.
lusophones. Oh, lusophone. That's the linguistic term for someone who speaks Portuguese for some reason. But really, when we think of this language, one incredibly influential and powerful country with rich history and kind people really does come to the top of all of our minds. Wait, what is that big blob sticking out of Mexico? Okay, isso. Hey, Brasil!
O que é isso?
It's mais bonito do mundo. God, I love Brazil so much. Oh, and I guess some people also speak it in Portugal.
Why is Portuguese spoken in all these different places? I don't get it.
Well, it all starts at the Big Bang, but I'll give you the short version. So the Roman Empire happened and they spread the Latin language over to the Iberian Peninsula. Then Spain and Portugal somehow split like an egg. Latin evolved like a Pokemon into Portuguese. Then a bunch of colonizers got on boats and did some questionable things in South America, Africa, and Asia. Some time passed, Bolsonaro got elected, and now you have modern Portuguese. But modern Portuguese is
Tu devia
very
botar a
different
legenda, não?
depending on
Pra
where-
quem
Não tem, na
souber
real.
inglês.
Não tem, tipo, só tem
Não tem
aquelas
aquela
que
gerada...
só tem a gerada
funciona.
automaticamente em inglês. Olha, aí é paia.
Não, se tu traduzir ela funciona, ela
fica
tá
bem?
melhorada.
É porque
ela
da
tá
última
melhor do
vez
que
ela
antes.
ficava tipo, vou comer a sua
Vamos
mãe.
ver.
Sem zoa.
Vamos ver se vai ficar de boa.
É isso aí, vou comer a mãe, vou pegar a mãe. O negócio.
What the fuck?
Era quando a gente foi assistir o Carrinhos, mano. Era só uns jumpscare, mano. Eu não sei cadê a B, C, D, F, G, H, J, L, M, N, O, P. Cadê P?
É lá, calma, passou.
Aqui.
Era S.
Ué?
Calma, homem. Calma, se acalma.
P, P. Não tem, não
Peça-
existe.
Ué.
Ué. Ah, já tava.
Será que tá lá em cima?
Já tava.
Ah, tá. Já
Where
tá
you
lá em
go.
cima. Ah,
If
tá.
you're ever on a layover in Portugal, you'll notice that the people there speak fast with a very closed mouth, like, Olá, sou português de Portugal. Eu sou de Portugal. It's like they have a gerbile or a Portuguese
Agora ele
man-o-war
pareceu um
jellyfish
português,
thingy in their mouth. Some of the language overlords even claim that European Portuguese sounds a lot like Russian, but as a speaker of both of those languages, I just don't see it. But caralho, mano, Brazilian Portuguese is one of the most beautiful things I've
Eu dou caralho,
ever
mano.
heard in my life.
Caralho,
When I
mano.
hear a Brazilian speak, it feels like I'm teleported to the top of Christ the Redeemer, and a bunch of tiny capybara angels grab me me and fly
Ah,
me
que
into the
foda.
clouds and serve me unlimited feijoada until
Era
I
só uma feijoadinha
Minha
agora, hein?
explode and release green and yellow confetti onto the streets of Rio de Janeiro. There are a ton
Rio
of
de
regional
Janeiro.
accents in Brazil, but in general, Brazilian Portuguese sounds open, expressive, sometimes goofy, and just downright adorable. They sound like, Oi, irmão, eu falo português do Brasil, brigadão. I'm a certified simp for the noises they make with their mouths, and I plan on permanently moving to a favela soon for full immersion to master the language and shock people on camera. Don't worry though, I won't go get killed or robbed. Y'all probably know that I got robbed last year in Baguette Land and recently in the United States, and as if real life robbery wasn't enough, the same day, coincidentally, criminals were also trying to gain access to my bank account logins. To say it's been an unsettling few
tá
days
bem.
is an understatement, and I have no idea how they got my information. It's just really a shame how monolingual betas and large corporations can so easily buy and sell our personal data online these days. That's why I trust the sponsor of today's video,
sutil.
Incogni. Buy
Caralho, do nada.
information and
Vou.
more.
Ai,
Incogni.
foda-se, passa.
Now let's talk about the alphabet. For the longest time, Portuguese was written in a discount version of the American alphabet with 23 letters instead of the naturally occurring 26 found in nature. However, in the late 2000s, the language overlords dropped new DLC into Portuguese, officially introducing the missing K, W, and Y into the alphabet, effectively copying us and making it the same as our system.
Yeah.
That's a crazy precedent to set. Adding new letters
assim
to a
que meu
lingo?
Gabriel
Come on,
teve
Lula, and
isso.
whoever the
É verdade, foi nessa brincadeira aí, mano.
dictator or king of Portugal or whatever
E o C cedilha, né, mano? Ele esqueceu do C cedilha.
is, y'all need
Sim,
Mas o
verdade.
C cedilha é uma DLC do C, né? Então não é,
É, uma DLC só do C. É.
só do C.
the multi-ocular
Lá não tem,
O.
né?
Não, lá não tem cedilha, pô. Cedilha é
Replace
loucura.
Não tem,
all
não,
your
tem, não tem cedilha e não tem acento.
É
vowels
doideira.
with the O
Caralho.
with 10 eyes, and tourism will increase exponentially. Portuguese uses a bunch of basic accent markers that
Oh,
are
yeah.
pretty standard in Romance languages, but they also have the same iconic unibrow that Spanish has. But in Spanish, the unibrow only goes on the N, while in Portuguese, the unibrow is biromantic and can be found snuggling on top of both the A and the O. And these unibrows, combined with the rest of the letters, make Brazilian sound so good that my legs shake and my jacked arms twitch when I hear it. Most of the alphabet is
What the
pronounced how
fuck?
you'd think it is, but some of the letters have gone spring break hog wild. The R is very often pronounced as an H, like in the word carro. I grew up with a Brazilian named Lohan, and my little pea brain at the time could not comprehend why we weren't calling him Lauren. The L is also quirky because it's often pronounced as a W, like in the word legal. Well, it looks like it should be pronounced legal, but it's actually legal. Another example is Brasil. However, the cutest noises by
Brasil.
far that come out of
Brasil.
Brazilians is the way that they pronounce the DE at the end of words, like in onde, verdade, saúde, GGG. It just makes me feel warm and tingly. And they don't make that noise in Portugal. Instead, they make silly noises like pronouncing S's at the end of words as an SH sound. So they say português instead of português. Wow, so cool. SMH my head. The language also has a ton of nasal sounds. It's like French phonology and Spanish vocab met on Tinder, produced an offspring and named him João. And you're thrown right into it from the very beginning. Say goodbye to the simple Spanish si and say hello to the elegant and sophisticated sin. I'd explain how to make that noise, but after years of speaking baguette surrender protest language, it's just something I do automatically. In total, there are a dozen nasal sounds represented by the unibrowed O and A, as well as a bunch of letter pairs. So if you want to learn Port, get ready to make a lot of and noises. They sound sus in isolation, but in normal words, I promise they're enchanting. Speaking of words, Portuguese vocab is super based and sigma-pilled. Over 90% of Portuguese words have a Spanish counterfeit version. Mexico just straight up stole most of them, like the words for food, ugly, and life, while other ones were just photoshopped or AI generated to look a little different, like eyes, city, and dark. The Spanish muy is so boring, but I'm overwhelmed with testosterone and estrogen when I say muito. And that's why I call Portuguese spicy Spanish. It's like they took the Spanish words and just dumped a gallon of Carolina Reaper hot sauce on them. Sometimes Portuguese can get a little unhinged though. Like they use numbers to denote the days. Monday is literally called second market. Tuesday is third market, and so on until they break the convention for Saturday and Sunday. But this is so confusing to me because Monday is called the second one? There's no first one? And why are they calling them markets? But hands down, my favorite thing about this language is the way they say the names of social media apps. Snapchat becomes a snappy chat. Instagram is Instagram. But the best is Facebook. If I were the Zuck, I would move the Facebook headquarters to Minas Gerais. Also, on Brazilian social media, you'll notice that they virtually laugh very differently than the rest of the world. Instead of the default ha 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 or ja 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 ja, they just spam the letter K like absolute mad lads. The spice and quirked up energy spreads to other parts of the language as well. The definite articles, and for noobs that means the word the, are O and ah, which are very confusing to my big American brain, since we use the word ah as an indefinite article. So when I see a menina written, my brain thinks that I'm reading a girl, and it takes a while for my Brazilian soul to catch up and understand it as the girl. There are also quite a few conjugations, and each verb has over 50 different forms as a result, but don't worry. They are pretty regular, minus the most common and important ones, like to be, to go, to come, and to see. Filho da p***. There are a bajillion contractions similar to French, 74 in total if I'm counting them correctly, but you'll get used to them over time. Eu juro pela vida do Bolsonaro. The subject pronouns are especially gnarly. I love how I is eu, which sounds like how we express disgust here in Freedom Land. The word for you is você, which just has a certain elegance to it. It's even better than the Russian Tui. And finally, to say we, they usually use the expression a gente, which literally means the people. And I think that brings a happy, collectivist, and communist feel to the language.
Toma essa aí.
No wonder it's spoken on Bing Chilling Casino Island. Now it's time to talk about shock factor. How will Portuguese speakers react to you speaking their language? Well, the truth is, not a lot of foreigners learn Port. Brazil is swallowed both geographically and linguistically by Mexican-speaking countries, as well as Fishanese-speaking fish. So when someone starts learning Portuguese, especially in American, that means they firmly resisted the strong propaganda pushing us to learn Mexican, and they instead chose to narrow in on Brazil for one reason or another. So they're grateful, even if you only know a little bit, and they will absolutely tolerate any mistakes, even if they're drastic, like saying pau instead of pão. I can promise you that if you go to Brazil and you whip out even a half-broken sentence in Port, they will do backflips, make you way more feijoada than you can eat, and even let you pet their capybaras.
Pior que é isso aí mesmo.
Oh,
Peraí, voltei.
Chega qualquer gringo falar aqui e fala assim, oi, aí, aê, todo mundo fica
I can
feliz.
promise you that if you
pior
go
que é isso
to
mesmo.
Brazil and you whip out even a half-broken sentence in Port, they will do
A
backflips,
gente é muito mais
make you
legal, mano, do que todos.
Não tem o que
way more
fazer.
feijoada than you can eat, and even let you pet their capybaras. Oh, and if you don't know what to say to a Brazilian, just look them in the eyes and say, o Bolsonaro é muito gostoso.
What the fuck? Mano. Você não souber o que falar.
Se você não souber o que falar, fala isso, mano. Vai dar certinho.
And I can promise you,
A
you'll
galera
at
vai
least
rir
provoke
pra caralho.
in
Vai.
the eyes and say, o Bolsonaro é muito gostoso. And I can promise you, you'll at least provoke some sort of reaction. When I was an engineer, I said that line to my boss's boss and my boss's boss's wife, who are both from Brazil. And they hated it. So now it's time to give Portuguese an official language simp certified rating on the simp scale.
Gigashed, não tem como, né?
On a scale of dog water to
Português e gigashed, não tem o que fazer.
Chad, I place Portuguese confidently and securely in the
Giga
Giga tier. There's just something about it, man. It's gorgeous, it's often silly yet academic when it needs to be. It's not a difficult language. Brazilians are wonderful and kind. Portugal exists, and it's just
Portugal existe.
a ton of fun to learn. If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting me on Patreon, where I make language learning tips
Bravo.
and tricks videos. And maybe give me a
Follow,
follow
follow.
on Twitter and Instagram. Let me know which language I should review next, and never forget.
Putz.
Ei, mano.
Aí é dislike no vídeo, né? Não tem o que fazer.
Ei, paia.
Paia,
Esse
mano.
aí tocou na ferida dos
Ele terminou com jumpscare, mano. Aí foi paia,
Caralho,
terminou com
mano.
jumpscare.
Ele acabou com a... Eu tava achando
Acabou,
ele
tava
legal.
tudo bem, aí agora não, mudou tudo, pô. Aí
Mudou
perdeu a
tudo.
moral. Não, acabou aí.
Brincou que não é para ser brincado.
Nossa, então, mano. Não tem o que fazer aí. Deixa eu ver o que temos aqui no... Deixa eu ver o que tem aqui nas coisas aqui. Aí mano, o ápice da criação de conteúdo. Eu vou reagir meu próprio vídeo. A gente vê meu próprio
Aí tu faz...
vídeo.
Aí
Eu edito e posto.
Mano, eu podia fazer isso, ó.
Será, velho? Imagina.
Mas tu tem que fazer assim, ó. Tu tem que reagir a algum vídeo aleatório, aí tu edita esse vídeo. Aí depois que esse vídeo sair, tu reage ao teu vídeo reagindo.
Não, mas é isso que eu vou
ao
fazer
vídeo
agora.
aleatório.
Vamos lá. Salve, salve,
Mas isso é
rapaziada.
reagindo?
É, reagindo já. Vamos lá.
Espera só guardar o prato, espera só guardar o prato.
Vai lá.
Rapidão.
Gente, agora é o vídeo infinito esse aqui, mano. Ô, a gente chegou lá, mano.